Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back. It took a little break. It's a busy time of the year. I'll say that much. Tyrina, you and I were talking about that before we started here, just how crazy it is right now in the hiring industry. It's that end of year swell surge, the push for the finish line, whatever you want to call it. It's busy. And last week I was traveling. I had some work travel. I got to go to University of Cincinnati for a networking event with some future prospective candidates, future alumni from UC, and we have a few plants out that way. So it was very nice to kind of interact and get the company name out a little bit more in the local area. And then I took a weekend trip up to Salem with my wife, daughter, and some of our cousins just to kind of explore which city and see what Salem in the fall was all about. Didn't know how that was going to go since my 4-year-old is afraid of everything. She loved it. She was like demanding to take pictures with Jason and Freddie and Ghostface by the end. So I was like, all right, well,
Good.
yeah, this girl was afraid to meet Cookie Monster at Sesame Place, but here we are. She's
Well,
up with
it's probably bittersweet for you, right? Because that's a
right,
sign of her getting older.
right, right. So fingers crossed she's not terrified of everything at Disney when we go this spring. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping this means. But anyway, we're
Mhm.
back now. It's been a while. Tyrina, how have you been? It's been a few weeks since you jumped on here with me.
Yeah, it's been good. I was on vacation myself as well. We did a family trip to Cancun, Mexico, which
Very
was
nice.
really nice. Stayed for a week. That was actually the first trip, first international trip for my children.
Nice.
Um, So it was really nice though. It was awesome. We had a good time and I'm happy to be back into the swing. I,
I'm
I,
glad.
I was actually happy to come back to fall weather. I'm from Pennsylvania, everyone, if they didn't know. So it was nice coming back to cooler weather because fall is my favorite season.
Yeah, definitely. It's this time of year is usually when I'm more in like my happy zone. It's comfortable. I don't have to like dress down in the house. I don't have to worry about like
Yeah.
black. Like it's a
Yep.
comfortable temp at all times in here. So, if you're no stranger to the show, you know when Tyrina joins me, we're usually talking about something specific. Other episodes, I try to get insight in terms of what people do, what they enjoy about it, to give that kind of feedback to job seekers who are curious about new positions. But when I can have a career coach on with me, I like to do deeper dives into some of the stuff. So we've talked about resumes. We've talked about optimizing your LinkedIn profile page. We've talked about some other stuff. This week, we wanted to kind of jump into the interview portion because that's usually what I see a lot of candidates get kind of the most worked up about. It's you get that interview, you've applied to hopefully not thousands, but dozens of open positions, and you finally get that call back and you're ready to either talk to the recruiter, talk to the hiring manager, and that's when you start to panic, especially if it's something new. Can I do this? What am I doing? What am I asking? Things like that. So Irina, you and I talked to we would go over some of the things you can prepare for, what you work with your clients on when they get to that stage, how you try to prepare them and make them not so overwhelmed going in. And on my end, from the recruiter perspective, can give some insight into some of those questions that you might get that you're not quite sure how to handle. I can let you know what I've heard, what is usually kind of the best way to prepare for some of the standard interview questions that you're going to get. I don't ask the crazy ones like, what's your favorite zoo animal, or give me an example of what superpowers you want. So I won't be going over
Right.
those in the interview. Just have fun with them. But so when it comes to that, Tyrina, when you're preparing them for that first one, what are some of those key questions that you try to tell them? These are things that you should probably be prepared to answer as you're going through, because any interviewer is likely going to ask, some basic questions to get information from you.
Yeah. So the basic questions that I coach my clients on, of course, are like, tell us about yourself. Another good question is, why should we choose you over other candidates? And the last one I'll talk about is, why do you want to work for this company? And that question right there is going to basically quizzing you and making sure that you did your homework and researching the company. But in going back to the first one, tell us about yourself. A lot of people, they hate that question because it's like, well, where do you want me to start? You want me to start at birth, or do you want me to start? You want me to start at a high point in my career? Like where do you want me to start? And so when coaching through that question, they're probably going to ask some form of it. They may not exactly say, tell us about yourself, but they may say like, tell us about your career or maybe your previous role. But you always want to revert back to why you are a top candidate for the role. And that's when you ensure that you're doing your homework and studying the job description and making sure you know what they want from a top candidate, what competencies they want you to have. So you can go into it briefly with the tell us about yourself, just talk about your educational background, transferable skills you have. But I always tell people, talk about your previous role, current role, or roles that have prepared you to do a role like this. Yes, tell us about yourself. Yeah, you may go into detail about other things, but you also don't want the answer to be too long. So you want to get straight to the point. What your current role is, what your transferable skills are, why are you qualified for the job? And if you want to, you can go into why you decided to pursue this industry in the first place. Um, when it comes to why are you the top candidate, that's when you can really just talk about yourself a lot. And a lot of people, they don't like that question either because I'm not good at selling myself. I'm not good at talking about myself. I was like, well, we got to undo that. So
Yeah.
I coach people through that. We review their resume. I said, you need to talk about these 3 points. And that's why I usually encourage people too. Like most of the people that I coach in interviews, they get their resume done by T. Lassiter Services first,
Mhm.
because then I know all about them. I know about their history. And then I'm able to coach them even better because I've already gotten to know them and their career. So when
Yeah.
it comes to answering that question, again, revert back to the job description and just like pour it on them. This is why I am the top candidate. I have this, and that. You're asking for this, I have it. That's the basis of the answer. And you don't want your answer again to be too long, maybe a minute or two. But you definitely don't want to ramble. You want to go straight to the point.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. That kind of takes me back to when I was teaching English and, students were writing their essays and I always told them prune away, don't have, if I say 5-paragraph essay, that doesn't mean 5-page essay, just be as
Yeah.
concise as you can. And interview prep is kind of the same. You want to have bullet points that you're ready to share, ready to touch on, but you don't, like you said, while I graduated high school this year, started at the local grocery store, like that's great.
Right.
They want to be more concise with that. And I also love that you brought up the why do you want to work here question, because I see a lot of like sarcastic responses on LinkedIn about that. Why do I want to work here? Because I need a job, obviously.
I need the money.
Yeah.
And you can't say that.
And usually there's frustration around that. I think a lot of it is what you alluded to. The companies want to see that you are specifically interested in this role, this company, not just I need a job. So I applied to it because I saw it, but I like the message behind your company and the mission
Yeah.
statement, or it's in an area, a field that I've always been curious about, and I'd like to expand my knowledge. That's really what anyone asking that question, as cliche of a question as it might seem. That's the goal, is to fish for some info, which brings me to a perfect segue to the next talking point that we had in terms of research that you're doing before the interview. So there's a lot of things that I see on LinkedIn, advice that people are giving about doing research into the job description, of course, doing research into the company, doing research into the hiring manager if you have that information. So when you're prepping your candidates, how deep do you have them dive into the research phase to get kind of those talking points that they need to be prepared to discuss in the interview?
Well, the wonderful world of LinkedIn makes it so much easier to do your research. I always tell people, I was in corporate for almost 20 years before I started my business. So I wish that LinkedIn was how it is now back then,
Yeah.
especially when I graduated college and I was, prepping for interviews. The research was a lot different. We didn't have as many resources as we have now. So along with everything that you just talked about, just researching the mission statement, going on the website, studying the job description, of course, maybe studying getting to know the hiring manager a little better, see, who is, hiring for this position. A lot of my candidates are kind of introverted. So I really have to push them to doing even more research.
Yeah.
So, and going back to LinkedIn, Most of the companies, they have a LinkedIn page. So I tell them to start there, start following the page, see what news articles that they're sharing, because it may be different than what's on the website. So I ask them to start there. And then there is this little tab that is called people, that you can see who works there if they're sharing it. You know, most of the companies that I help people prepare for as far as interviews are concerned, they do share that information about who works there. And, you know, I tell them, like, listen, we also have to look for red flags. We have to look for red flags. And a lot of times, if the company is not like a startup, if you don't see longevity with some of the people that work there, like they've only been there 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, that could be a sign that they have a high turnover. You
Mhm.
know, so that goes into the research as well. Also going on Glassdoor, see if they have any bad reviews. You know, there's a plethora of things that on top of the normal research that I ask my clients to do.
Yeah, and then part of the research phase doesn't happen until the interview's going. You know, you're in full swing, you're answering questions, receiving the questions from them. And that's kind of an ideal time for any candidate to try to pick out some things that they want to know more about, because there's always the question at the end, do you have questions for me? And we'll talk about that in a few
Yeah.
minutes. But as they're going through that hiring process and listening to the questions, what are some of the key things that you try to tell them? You know, listen out for this if they're asking you questions, because if it's coming up a bit, you'll want to make sure that you're emphasizing this on your end too.
Yeah, you know, throughout the process of interviewing, I know for me, and I've heard this from my clients, it just becomes like a natural conversation. You know, you may answer something in a way where they'll elaborate or they'll agree on. So you want to make sure that if they're elaborating on anything that has to do with the company, that you're keeping note of that. I always tell people to bring a notebook. You may want to write things down as the interview goes on and not just at the end when you're asking questions.
Mhm.
Also, you want to make sure that you're paying attention, because if they've answered this question during the interview and you ask it at the end, it shows that you weren't paying attention.
Right.
And you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, most of the things that I tell my clients to look out for, of course, are, you know, anything that has to do with any uh, events that they've done. You
Mhm.
know, if it's something like a like volunteerism or anything that they've done, that really shows that they're, you know, a company that likes to give back to the community. That's a really good place to, you know, to start, especially in showing that you've done your homework yourself. You want to make sure that you are looking at the website, seeing if they've done anything recent, and that could be a starting point or like an icebreaker. Like, hey, I saw that you were at this community event. Is this something that you do, you know, on a yearly basis? Are you always involved in the cancer walks? You know, a
Mhm.
lot of companies do that. But some of the other things, of course, are anything that has to do with leadership. What leadership is asking for from the top candidate.
Yeah.
And generally, after you answer a question, you know, they'll elaborate on that. Like, well, you know, we're looking for this in a candidate. Do you have this? You know, have you ever had experience using this software or that software? So it's just like those indicators, again, to ensure that you are doing your homework as far as the company is concerned.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, just pay
Yeah.
attention throughout the entire interview, because you never know, they may elaborate on some things that you do have a question on at the end, and you can just mark that as a question that was already answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the next things we're going to touch on are kind of the questions that everyone can come to expect in an interview, and one of them I'm sure is very dreaded by a lot of people entering into a new field. But first, you know, if you're entering into a new field, you're going to get that question: what has you looking to make the change at this point? So when asked that question, what are some of the things that you try to prepare your clients? You know, anyone going into an interview, obviously you want to be up front, but you also don't, my manager sucks. I hate it here. You know, you're in this school, you know, the kids are driving me crazy. Like, you don't want to come off as just too negative in an interview. So what are some of the things that you try to prepare them for when they come to that question, so that they can still give insight, but not feel as though you're just kind of blowing off the question?
Yeah, and You hit the nail on the head with, don't say anything negative about why you're trying to transition. Because, at the end of the day, every job has something that you may not like,
Mm.
but you want to be positive, about that question. So, of course, don't say anything negative about any part of your career or your current or previous position. The other thing that I tell my clients to talk about is most of my clients, especially because they want to make more money, they find that if the job isn't fulfilling, it's because they've reached their cap as
Mm.
far as salary, especially with teachers, transitioning educators. A lot of transitioning educators, they want to make more money. They want to do something maybe more fulfilling, but they don't want to be on administration. They don't want to be a principal. They don't want to be an assistant. They don't want to do that. So their only option is to, pursue something in corporate or ed tech or something like that, right? So when it comes to that question, I tell my clients to say, I feel that this is a good time to transition because I want to find a job that's more fulfilling. I feel like I have a lot more to offer. So this position is perfect for me in pursuing my long-term career goals.
Mm.
It could be something as simple as that. And then you can, of course, elaborate. But as you can see, I didn't say anything about salary, making more money. I didn't
Mhm.
say anything about, oh, I just don't like that job anymore. You know, if those are the reasons, that's fine. But that's not what they want to hear.
Yeah.
They want to hear that you're trying to grow in your career, that you feel like you have more to offer. You have all of these transferable skills. Also, in that question, you can talk about you've been upskilling a lot and researching different industries to get into, and you feel like you have the most transferable skills to do this role, and it would be very fulfilling, and you can do the job. Something simple as that. Of course, I would want you to elaborate more so, and when I work with specific people, I'm able to like coach them through elaborating, but that's basically the foundation of trying to answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you kind of touched on it there, and this is the dreaded interview question. It's the salary question because I know it's a tough thing for, especially if coming from education. You have no real idea what some of the different job functions are going to pay. If you're prepared to take a pay cut, but you have a bottom line. So when you're preparing your clients for that question, because I'm used to getting that flipped on me as the recruiter, and that's totally fine. If it's more
Mhm.
so, what's the budget for the range, and that's something I obviously will have information on, so I can share
Yeah.
with them if that's usually the case. But for you, how do you tell them to best prepare for that question so that they're not, shorting themselves, but at the same time making the numbers one that they couldn't even be considered then for the next round due to budgets, whatever like that?
Yeah, I well, first that is included in research. You want to do the research yourself, using different resources, Glassdoor, any other resource that you can find on Google, with what the range should be. So what the minimum should be. It does get a little tricky because some states pay more than others.
Mhm.
You have to take that into account, the area, the economy, so on and so forth. But when they are asking that question, mostly it comes after they've had the interview. I'm when it comes to asking the recruiter, I feel like it's perfectly fine to ask a recruiter. But in my career personally, and everybody may not agree with this, I do not ask salary questions during the interview. I I do ask questions at the end, and we're going to talk about what some good questions are to ask at the end of an interview.
Mhm.
But that has never been my style of asking. If they bring it up, then we can talk about it. But to me, it still seems during the interview when they're just trying to see if you're good for the job, I don't think personally is the right time to ask, the salary, for the job.
Mhm.
Now, if they offer you the position because you've done your research, if they especially if they don't have it posted already, because a lot of jobs they don't post the salary,
Mhm.
uh that's when you can really dig into negotiating.
Yeah.
And so when they offer you the position, say they want to move you on, to meet leadership, so on and so forth, You already have in your head what the range is. You already have in your head what you want your minimum to be. But the little trick, I'm going to give you a tidbit. I usually don't talk about this publicly. It's usually like a little trick that I teach my clients. And I actually just did this with someone yesterday. She's in salary negotiating right now. And I say, listen, what is your minimum? And the person gave me their minimum. I said, okay, you know that's your minimum. Go a little higher than that. Go a
Mhm.
little higher and see if, and then the negotiating may go back and forth. They may add maybe 3,000-4,000 more to what they originally offered you.
Right.
And that's like meeting in the middle,
Yeah.
and but when it comes to asking that question during the interview, that is not my style.
Okay.
Unless they ask.
Yeah.
Um, but you can definitely talk about salary before you're in an interview with, hiring manager or leadership. When you're talking to the recruiter, which I feel is best, is if you find a job through a recruiter, that is definitely the best time to ask the salary range if they have that information, because if the range is too low, you can determine if you want to move forward. I feel like you should always move forward because practice makes perfect. You can definitely practice with as many interviews as you can, even if the salary isn't, right where you want to be.
Yeah.
But personally, I do not ask a salary question during the interview. It's usually before with a recruiter, and then after when they, ask you when they offer you the position.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No wrong timeline to do that. A lot of people right now just want to be transparent initially. So if you get to that early, then totally fine. Even if I've
Right.
got messages from people before we've even had a screen asking for the range, and I'm happy to do that because I understand that it's a commitment to get on a phone call with someone, take some time out of your day. So if we're not even
Yeah.
each other, then absolutely.
Right.
So then you get to the end of the interview, and this is usually when I ask, what questions can I answer for you? And as much as I enjoy when people say, none, you did such a great job explaining everything, it makes me feel so good that I'm doing such an adequate job. But
Right.
at the same time, you should have some questions. I'm sure I haven't checked every single box. And if I did, then hey, pat on the back for me. But as you're going into the interviews, preparing your clients for these, what are some of the main questions that you tell them to prepare for? And maybe they do get checked off, along the way, but, what are some of the 3, 4, 5 questions that you say, these are some of the things that you should be looking out for? And if they don't cover this in the interview, make sure that you're bringing it up at the end.
Yeah. So one of the questions, I actually have quite a few, but I'll give a couple. So the first one and this is with any industry, any job. I know throughout my career, I was always looking for an opportunity to grow my skills or to grow within the company. So one of the questions I say for my clients to ask is there any programs that you offer that help, towards cater to professional growth?
Mhm.
A lot of the positions that I had, they had like maybe some online learning, or we would go to town halls and learn things. I don't know if they still do this. I think they do. I was a Toastmaster. If you've never heard of that, Matt, have you ever heard of
Wow.
Toastmasters? So Toastmasters, oh, I'm aging myself. Toastmasters helps you to with your public speaking
Okay.
and other things, but the main skill that I needed help with early in my career, and I wanted to grow in because I went to school for communications and technology, is to continue to grow with my public speaking, because if you are going to be in leadership positions, most likely you're going to have to talk in front of a whole department or your team, and
Mhm.
you have to be able to communicate effectively with your team. So Toastmasters is an example of something that offers a professional growth, for you personally. And it was offered for free. I didn't have to pay for it. It was something within the company that I worked for at the time. So that is one of the questions that I asked. And another question that I actually grew to ask in my career, because after having so many different types of managers, you want to make sure that you're doing a good job,
Mhm.
during your probationary period or after. So one of the other questions I would tell my clients to ask and say, what metrics do you use to determine the success of a person in this role. And they will tell you maybe specifics, or they'll say, oh, can I get back to you on that? I need to really talk to the person who is actually going to be your manager, because sometimes you're not interviewing with the person who you're going to be
Right.
under. But I started to ask this question mainly in my career because I've had very hands-off managers before, and I've had very hands-on. And especially early on in my career, I would toss and turn at night. I'm like, am I doing a good job? I haven't heard from my manager. I don't know if I'm doing well. Am I meeting my numbers? If it was, a job where they determined, how much you do in a certain time frame.
Mhm.
And so knowing the answer to that question up front, now there's not a guessing game if you're doing well or not, because you know the information. And if they aren't able to tell you in the interview, once you get the job, you can ask your manager up front. But those two are like the top questions
Mhm.
that I always ask, no matter what industry that I'm doing interview prep for.
Yep.
But there are definitely a long list of questions that I choose from depending on what the role is, but those are my top two.
Yeah, and I'll give an easy one because I go over this information anyway. But typically when I'm asked this, it kind of shows that people are prepared, because I'm not the only person that you're going to speak to in the interview process. So
Right.
usually I'll get the question of what additional steps are we looking at? What does the process look like from here? So
Right. What's the next steps? Yes.
ask just to get some insight. And that was kind of one of the things we talked about, because panel interviews are another thing. You're going to speak to a hiring manager. You might be looking at 2, 3, 4 more steps depending on the role that you're applying for and its place within the company. There might be a few people that you need to touch base with because you're working collaboratively, cross-functionally so much. So asking that question gives you some strong insight. And then, of course, the question that we're going to kind of take into a little bit further discussion is, when can I expect to hear back from you in terms of a decision on the role? So that's certainly a fair and a good question to ask in any interview, because every recruiter will be as upfront with you as they can. Sometimes it might take a week to get back in touch with the hiring manager. They're traveling, vacation, they just have a lot going on at the plants. Those things happen. So asking for a realistic time frame is certainly a good thing to do. But then, as you're preparing your clients for the interviews, what are some of the pointers that you're giving to them when it comes to the follow-up? Do you have them send a follow-up email? What's some of the timelines that you give them? Like, if you haven't heard in X amount of days, feel free to send them a message. Those kind of things that you prepare for.
Well, after the interview, I say send a thank you message, a thank you email, like 24 hours after, even if it's on a Friday. You can, they'll see the email on Monday, first thing, if they don't work on the weekends. So that's the first thing, saying, thank you so much for the opportunity. You can throw some things in the email that states like why, just reminding them why they're qualified, and you're looking forward to hearing back. Okay. So when it comes to the timeline of if you haven't heard back, I say within a week.
Okay.
If you have not heard back, I say the following, week, follow up with them, send a message, just say, hi, I'm just following up. I know you're probably super busy, but I just wanted to keep in touch and follow up about when I should hear back. So a lot of times, well, not a lot, but I have heard, some stories about people being ghosted. Sometimes they'll come back and say the role has been eliminated, or it's something crazy may happen. And so just to throw this, I know we're talking about interview preparation, but just to throw this in there, this is why it's important not to put your eggs all in one basket. Keep applying even while you are waiting to hear back from the job that you actually really, really want. Because you never know, things happen, people rescind offers. Unfortunately, I've had that happen to a couple of my clients. So you want to make sure that you're staying busy, you're continuing to apply, tweaking your resume along the way to ensure that it matches with the jobs you're applying to, and so on and so forth. But a week is a good time to follow up. and definitely just continue trucking through, those applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyrina, as always, I'm so appreciative of you jumping on here to discuss this. I think some very valuable insights shared, and hopefully, if you're watching this, listening to this, you're getting a lot of insight as you prepare for that interview that you're going to crush. Go in with confidence. That's the main thing that you can do. Easier said
That's
than
right.
done. That's the main.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up, I know you've got pages that you can share, and you've got some upcoming things that people can participate in. So, feel free to take some time, let them know where they can find you, what they can sign up for.
Absolutely. So, of course, follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn at Tyrina Lassiter. We offer here at T Lassiter Services, which is a interview prep and resume writing company. We offer free consultations. So when you go to my LinkedIn page at the top, you'll see a link that'll direct you to the free consultation form, and you can schedule a call with me or someone from my team. Also, the website is www.tlassiterservices.com, where you will find all of our services that we offer and our rates. And just a little hint, we do offer payment plans on every single thing on the website. I know a lot of people, they love that option of paying in increments.
Mhm.
Also, follow me on Instagram at the.careernavigator.com. On Instagram, I do a lot of informative reels and fun reels. And I also go live every other week. I go live on LinkedIn and on Instagram on Thursdays every other week. And the last thing that I will talk about, which is super exciting, this month, or actually, I just promoted it. I'm starting to promote it this month, but starting November 7th, I will be doing free career coaching. So we will be together for 4 weeks starting November 7th. And we are going to go through all of the strategies and phases and tools that you need to effectively transition. We're going to go over updating your resume, optimizing your LinkedIn and networking on LinkedIn, making sure that you're tweaking your resume along the way, as well as interview preparation, and then also trying to ensure that you're still on the track of accomplishing the rest of your career goals, even after you get, your dream job. So definitely check that out. Just go to my LinkedIn page or my Instagram, and you will find the link to sign up and apply. And I'm really, really excited about that. The spots are limited, so hurry and apply. Everyone won't be accepted into the program, depending on, what they want to get out of it, but definitely apply and join us. We have a lot of fun in all of my trainings and classes. So definitely check that out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Tyrina. If you're not following her, make sure that you are. Otherwise, hope you have a great week. Go ahead and take care of those interviews, and we'll talk to you next Monday.
Bye-bye.